everyone. Great to be here again. It sure was an engaging conversation yesterday evening, and I'm looking forward to much more today. But before we enter into the day with cognitive back and forth, let's enter into a time of prayer, of meditation, of chant, using a simple chant coming out of the Taizé tradition. We're going to sing, "Come and Fill." And the invitation again is for you to allow yourself to just sink into your heart. Allow the words just to carry you right into the very heart of God. Simply by shifting attention, opening up to the possibility of our deep connection with the sacred reality, with the love of God in which we live and we move and we have our being. The words are simple. Come and fill our hearts with your love. In your presence we are holy. Come and fill our hearts with your love. Alleluia. Come and fill our hearts with your love. In your presence we are
it to be embodied love? What is it to be embodied peace? What is it to know deep in our bones that we are spiritual beings having a human experience, as Pierre Desjardins says? Let's try to experience that right now. Ruach, God's life force, breath. I invite us to close our eyes. I invite us to get comfortable in our seats and feel our feet rooted in the ground. Become aware of the sounds wafting through space. The touch of the air on our skin. And the ease of our breath, inhaling and exhaling. And I invite us now to focus on our hearts. And imagine instead of breathing into your lungs, you're breathing into your heart space. Imagine God's light and love entering into your heart with every inhale. And with every exhale, traveling through all of the arteries of your body into all the little capillaries, filling you with that light, with that life force, with that love. So let's take a breath into our hearts and let's imagine that we're breathing in love right now. And allowing that love to travel throughout our body. And let's take another breath and breathe in the gift of peace. And allow that peace to travel throughout our body, our arms, our hands, our legs, our toes. And take another breath and breathe in the gift of joy. And allow that joy to enter into your bloodstream. And now the gift of compassion for ourselves. And as you focus on your breath, just come into an awareness of any kind of sensations you're picking up in your body. What does it feel like to be embodied spirit? Holy Spirit, gift divine, we give you thanks for this day, for this breath, for the capacity to come together and learn and have awesome conversations and to dream your dream for our world. Help us to listen deeply. Help us to see how you would have us see. In your name we pray. Amen. Oh, you know what? I don't have my clicker. So, given that, I had a bunch of wonderful little conversations today with people coming in. It seemed like our conversation last night sparked a lot of wonderful things. And I love that. I love that a lot. And I want to reiterate what Mark said, that last night energized me. And I love to learn from the questions that you ask, because there's something that I'm fully aware of, that what I'm trying to say is not necessarily what comes across. And a lot of times I need to hear what I need to shift or change, or I am pushed to think more deeply and more clearly. So, I love it. I just want you to know that. So given that, I do want to, there was some conversation today around something that I said last night about what happens in the green value system to faith and how that shifts in a yellow value system. And somebody picked up the sense that she thought I was being pretty negative on the green value system. So let me clarify this a bit. Blue value system. This is the salt of the earth people. These are the folks that, regardless of what they're going to give to the church stewardship campaign, they're going to be the folks that are going to show up, wind, rain, or shine, because they've committed to show up and do something on behalf of others. It's a very communal focus. It's a very self-sacrificing focus. It's really what knits community together. That is the gift of the blue value system. That is the gift that the church gives to our world. And that is something that I don't want us to let go of. Okay? Again, this is a transcend and include. When we get into a green value system, though, and when we discover in a green value system or begin to question the truth, and see that truth is, there's no capital T truth. All truth is relative. I have my truth, you have your truth. And we might discover our communal truth together as we talk with one another. But when that happens, why go to church? I can listen to a podcast. As a matter of fact, I have to confess, there have been many times I've pulled in a church parking lot, and there's a good podcast on, and I'm like, sermon podcast, sermon podcast. Sometimes the podcast wins out, and I go in for coffee and donuts after the service. So this is the world in which we find ourselves, right? So in the green value system, you see that sense of, well, here's a statement in a green value system. I find Jesus captivating, but I don't want anybody to tell me what to believe or how to think. Right? I started a house church with a group of women who were allergic to religion, and they were really fine reading the Bible, Lectio Divina style. They were really fine talking about Jesus. But 2 years into this house church, they finally said to me, are you trying to do a bait and switch? Because we know you're a Methodist pastor, and are you trying to get us, like, to go to a church? And I'm like, no, I thought this was our church. So there's this sense of skepticism, and skepticism of all institutions in that green value system. And this is what we're navigating right now in our churches. How do we navigate that space with the remnant of the blue value system still in our veins? Okay? And then we move to the orange value system, and this is when I said that we can then have conversations and not make people wrong in terms of whatever faith tradition they find themselves in. But a woman today also reminded me that it's also in the yellow value system where we begin to integrate different faith traditions together. And somebody used the word interspirituality. Who is that person? Interspirituality. So correct me if I'm getting anything wrong here, okay? So this sense of not just, hey, I'm going to a yoga class and I'm picking up beautiful things that help me when I go to church on Sunday morning, integrate that, but really a sense of there's a movement of creating kind of a whole different spirituality and faith practice in the integration of that. Do I have that right? Yes.
And I think what I was trying to clarify is different from interfaith. So it's not about thinking and learning. I mean, that's included, but it's literally going deeply into different traditions.
Yeah.
As they're in the spiritual practice. That's partly what Henry spoke about too. So that ability to, even though we come from a Christian tradition, and I know people do this in this room, but being open to experiencing a Buddhist tradition, practice of meditation, a yoga tradition and so forth. And it's not skipping across lightly, it's actually absorbing that into the spiritual practice. And it's not a self-centered focus. I
Right.
would say that actually.
Yeah, because how that shows up in a green value system is that, well, I'll take a little bit of Native American spirituality, I'll take a little bit of Buddhism, a little bit of Hinduism, a little bit of Christianity, and I'll create my own thing, and I can have it in my back pocket, and I can, it's a very ego-driven kind of practice that, nothing really works for me, so I'm going to create my own thing, and there's no invitation to go into the depths of what do we do with pain? What do we do with suffering? What do we do when life smacks us? And if we're just, surfing the top, that's not gonna, that's gonna take us in some very weird places. Yeah, Henry?
I'm just thinking that just what you just said now, you're describing the shadow side
Yes.
of the green man.
Exactly.
But the other side of it is when the green is very much entering into that interspiritual experience, they are delving deeply into the pain. And also
Well, I would say that that's a yellow.
I'm just saying that
Yeah, that's a movement into yellow. So it's not the positive of green, it's the movement into yellow. That's what happens in yellow. It's not a green experience.
Could you put back up on the slide so that those folks who were here last night and myself to remember?
Actually, this is a new slide deck, and I don't have it in this one. I also want to remind you that you got in your emails 2 excellent articles about spiral dynamics. I really want to invite you to read the one that came out of the What is Enlightenment magazine, 2002.
So we only shared one because it was lighter reading, but I will share the second one by noon hour today.
Okay, and you should have gotten it in your email. I think that's how that came.
That's how it came.
Okay? Who did it come from?
It came in your first registration response as an attachment.
And there's so much, if you Google spiral dynamics, you will get a plethora of information. And I would so delight in you learning more about it. Okay, are we ready to transition into today? Okay, let's go. Okay, so what I want to do just in this beginning morning section is to look at, in Paul Nixon in my book called Weird Church, what we do in the first section of the book is we say, okay, well, how do these shifts manifest in churches? How are we seeing these shifts manifesting in churches? And so we call them the meta shifts toward the rising church. We highlight 7 of these shifts in the book, and what we're highlighting is really the movement from blue-orange into a green-yellow consciousness. But I'm just going to share 2 with you to let you know how this works. And then I want you to buy the book to read the rest of it. Okay. The first one is fear to freedom. And actually, this is that shift from the green value system into the second tier thinking, where we get that balcony perspective. St. Paul talks about this in his letters. Jesus talks about this. The book of Acts epitomizes this movement. But I think it's part of the Christian faith that we have not fully understood, nor have we embraced. So I just ask you, how does fear show up in our church today? Yeah.
I think part of the absence of the young people is the fear. When I talk to our daughter and her friends, it's like, oh, you guys don't understand living in a fearful world, like the world is going to end. You know that there's global warming, climate change, all of these things going on. And so I think that they're immobilized by fear, and the absence of these younger generations and the absence of people is part of what's happening in our church because of their fear.
Boy, you've just said a lot right there, because there's so many levels to fear, right? There's the generalized fear in our culture about, as we say, a Trump-shaped world. There's this fear about, wow, we're killing our planet. What's it going to look like in even 20 years from now? Culture war fear. So there's this underlying anxiety that we just we swim in a regular basis. So there's that buzz of fear. And then on top of that, when we get into our local churches, what are we contracting around? What gets us stuck?
How are we going to pay for it?
How are we going to pay for it? So financial fears. What else?
Are we relevant?
Are we relevant? Right.
Will we survive?
Will we survive? Man, exactly. So many levels there.
In some cases, will the building fall down around our ears?
Right, so we have these buildings that now we can't even maintain anymore because we don't have the financial resources to maintain them. But yet they've been a spiritual home for how many generations, right? How about this as a fear? Wow, I came to this church as a baby, or my grandparents were in this church. The church can't die on our watch. Right? Yeah. So there's so many songs that we sing about this. I love this song, Many Gifts, One Spirit. God of changing glory, God of time and space, when we fear the future, give to us your grace. As the old ways disappear, let your love cast out our fear. So those fears, there's 2 towering realities. This new generation of young adults that are showing up more in a green value system, right? That aren't coming into our worship experiences. And then there's the death tsunami in our churches. Sometimes when I go into a church as a consultant, I ask the pastor, how many more years do you have? And the pastor's like, what do you mean, how many more years? And I say, well, who are your top givers? And how old are they? Oh, talk about fear. You know, when you can think of your church and maybe there's 5 top givers and they're in their late 70s, mid 80s, and if one of those top givers dies, that's the difference between full-time ministry and less than full-time ministry. That's the death tsunami, right? Okay, that's just the tip of the iceberg. Paul Nixon and I, this is a very conservative guess, but we think with that, those two towering realities, that church as we know it will be done by 2050, if not the planet overheating before then. Yeah. That's, I mean, do you agree with that? Yeah. Yeah, or earlier. Yes. Right. In my district, United Methodist District in Portland, Oregon, in the next 5 years, 50% of the churches are going to close in the next 5 years. What's really, I think, interesting is when this church decline started, it was actually when the church growth movement was birthed in the 70s and 80s. So how many conferences have we gone to that, if you just do these 5 things, or if you just do this and you just do that? I remember as a pastor going to those and I felt traumatized. Because, you'd actually go back and try to implement it, and it just didn't work. It just didn't work. So we know that this issue is more than just trying harder at the next new idea. This is a value system issue with a rapid rate of technological change. Okay? So what do we do with that? I am just amazed at the story of Pentecost, because I think that the disciples, when Jesus ascended into heaven, had no clue what to do either. And Jesus said, go to Jerusalem and wait on the Spirit. And they probably didn't know what that meant. So what do? They have a church meeting. Because they're thinking rationally, and they're trying to build a strategic plan to do what Jesus said, and that is to be witnesses of God's love and peace to the ends of the earth. And there's just 11 of them, and they're fishermen. How the heck are we going to do that? And so they're like, well, if we get our 12th man, then we'll be good to go. So they called a committee meeting, and they said, our committee is lacking one more person, and it has to be somebody that knew Jesus. We have all this criterion, and they found some people, they drew straws, they got the 12th man. Okay, we've done everything that we know what to do. We've done everything that we know what to do. Thank God for Pentecost. And what happens at Pentecost? The Spirit blows those shutters and those doors open, and they move from their rational mind into their hearts, as Henry had us singing today, into that heart space, right? Their hearts were strangely warmed. They began to do things that they never did before. They began to listen deeply. They began to be attuned to this heart spirit that told them to do really counterintuitive things. Hey, Ananias, Saul, he came to kill all of you Jesus followers. He's been blinded on the road to Damascus. He's staying at this house. I'd like you to go over there, lay hands on him so he can see you, to get a really good shot at you. Right? Hey, Philip, you know that road where people get mugged, the chariots go by? We just want you to go there and hang out. And then when you see the next chariot, stick your thumb out And when that chariot stops, we want you to get in. Very counterintuitive, right? Hey, Peter, you've been such a good Jew. You followed all of the law. You eat kosher. I mean, you are such a good Jew. Now I want you to eat things that you're not supposed to eat. And I want you to talk to people and be with people you're not supposed to be with. Whoa. None of that is on a strategic plan. Would you ever put any of those things on a strategic plan? Would you ever think that somebody doing that counterintuitive stuff is actually sane? But if you read the book of Acts, it's a story of insanity. Right? There's a new breed of people that I see coming up in the church. They're waiting on God's timing. They're asking, where is Christ showing up? They're discerning the movement of the Spirit in community. They're not tied to the orange value system norms of success. They see the realm of God more important than church growth or saving institutions. They're these pioneering innovators, much like those early apostles in the first century church. And a lot of times what the institutional church does is they say, wow, you are crazy, you are weird. There is no place for you to do that work, right? There's also young adults that are not a part of the church, but have been captivated, I would say, by that movement of love, that movement of the Holy Spirit. There's a group of young adults that they're now called Yes Theory. You got a picture of that. Yes Theory. One is from Turkey, one's from Egypt, one is from New York City, and one is from Canada. They met in Montreal, and their whole mission is to the millennial generation and helping them to say yes to life, to say why not, to move beyond fear, and to say yes to love. So I have a little video of one of the things that they did. Can you play that? You have to click it on them. not in keeping with the spiral, is it? But, or the Christian faith, but, yes.
Also in Montreal, the United Church, in 2017, we had youth from all over Canada, one who's sitting nearby, and we sent 6, students to Montreal, and it was amazing because they did break every barrier. They were dancing, they were excited, and then they came home, and they were so excited, and they needed that, the music, the dancing, the feeling the spirit. They need that back in church today.
Yeah, so I'm just giving you a little taste of what that looks like and what that feels like. Okay, so here we go. Let's move on. So the next big shift, and this kind of is in keeping with what we just saw, is this shift from broadcast to social collaboration. So at the turn of this century, we waved goodbye to the industrial age. Really, that's the waning of the orange value system. And we entered into the information age, the burgeoning of the green value system. The amount of information today released in the world on a daily basis, this is a 2015 statistic, is equivalent to a 20-foot high shelf of books wrapped around the equator every day. We create as much information in 2 days now as we did from the dawn of humanity through 2003. And these are, again, 2015 stats. Technological changes, the advent of the web, the advent of smartphones. This was a big disruption in the newspaper industry. And when I began reading articles about how our newspapers were folding in this information age, I began thinking, wow, what they're saying about the newspaper industry is what we've been saying in the church as well. So what happened in the newspaper industry is their workforce shrunk by about 20,000 positions over the last 20 years. In the United States, there's 126 fewer daily papers than in 2004. They lost their major source of revenue of classified ads to Craigslist. Craigslist cost the newspaper industry $5.4 billion from 2000 to 2007. Because now what can happen? Anyone can share their story on the internet. The internet brings news faster than print journalism. It's a convenient on-demand format. So how does this relate to the church? Here we go. Try this one on. A journalist goes to school to learn a craft. And it's the craft of journalism, of seeking truth, and then sharing that truth. How to communicate a set of truths to an audience. A pastor goes to seminary to learn truth claims and to be able to speak those to an audience. The person who holds the truth broadcasts it out to that audience. One person holding the truth to many. Good. The same thing in the church. A church building gets as many people inside as it can in order to hear truth in the form of a worship service with a sermon or a Bible study with a teacher. Broadcast news gets as many subscribers as possible, both in print and TV. It's the same kind of form. An expert in the craft is delivering truth to a gathered audience. So just as the internet and social media disrupted the newspaper industry, both paper and broadcast, they've also disrupted the church. Podcasts, smartphones now become the source of truth in our world. What do we say when we don't know something? Let's Google it. Right. So we've moved from a broadcast form of delivering truth, one to many, means of communication, to a social media form of discovering truth together. Social media gives people multiple platforms for sharing ideas, for organizing movements, for seeking support, for asking questions, for convening groups, for making money, for watching the latest cat videos. This is how that works. It's collaborative action. And that's the new morphic field of engagement. In 2015, 300 video hours were posted every minute to YouTube. 300 video hours every minute in 2015. Only 40% of the web is commercially manufactured. The rest is fueled by passion and collaborative action. So consumers have now become developers and vendors and marketers and laboratories. There's so many podcasts out there on how to start your own side hustle using social media. Another example of this is the Arab Spring. How did that movement get its momentum to topple authoritarian regimes all over the Middle East? It wasn't through broadcast news. How was it? Facebook. Yeah, social media, right? So there's 4 means of communication that the New York Times discovered that people were using to get the news. Okay? One is online, one is print, one is mobile, one is social media. And they found that all of these are growing exponentially. Yet the church continues to invest in one model, as if we're the only game in town. And that is last century's model of broadcast. And that's what we do every Sunday morning. So let's just take a moment and sit with that. The church continues to insist that this is the best way to make disciples for the transformation of the world. But is it? The New York Times, one of the only newspapers that's really, they're actually growing now because they have diversified and they understand how people access truth. So, could we reconfigure church and look upon church as a platform? A platform for creating environments for convening and supporting groups that want to grow spiritually and learn more about Jesus both virtually and in real time. So I want us to think about platforms like Google or Wikipedia. These platforms allow people to connect around their passions with minimal barriers for engagement. I can be in my pajamas, in my bed, and engaging in social media. It doesn't matter what language I speak, it doesn't matter what ethnicity I am, I have equal access on that platform. As opposed to the church that puts up lots of barriers. We have 1 or 2 services on Sunday. We have a dress code. We have behavioral codes. We have language barriers. we are pretty much racially and ethnically divided when we come together on Sunday morning. So, what if we used this? What if we began experimenting with this? And I know this is hard to wrap our brains around what that would look like. So I have an example here. Union Coffee Shop is a ministry in Dallas, Texas. It is right off the SMU campus. It was started as a new church start. And if you walk in that coffee shop, you will see Michael, the pastor, sitting there on his computer. First time I walked in there, I'm like, I want his job. But there's a lot more that Michael does. Because Michael gets to know everybody that walks into that coffee shop. And there's a lot of people that walk into that coffee shop. He also happens to have a worship service on Tuesday nights, and people are in the coffee shop, they're working on whatever they're working on. They might have their earphones in, and over to the side is music playing and a gathering of people in worship. And Michael says, you know, a lot of people, they take their headphones off. And they're still kind of doing their computer, but they're intrigued and they're listening. Now, one day, one of the students came in. He was a nursing student. He was working on the cancer ward of the children's hospital. These are terminally ill children. And he came in and he looked very depressed and forlorn. And Michael said, hey, you know, what's happening? You look pretty depressed. And he started telling Michael about his work on this cancer floor. And, you know, he began tearing up and talking about these kids and how strong they were and how courageous they were and how they were his heroes. And he said, I just wish that they could know what heroes they are. And Michael said, well, what would that look like to you? And then he began thinking. And he said, oh my gosh, wouldn't it be great if we could get them dressed up in superhero costumes? And Michael said, do you really want to go down that path and that dream? And the guy said, yeah, what would that be? And Michael said, do you know that there's 2 sewing groups that meet here on Thursday afternoons? And do you know, I know the entire hospital administration because they come in here and get their coffee too? What would it be like if I got you and your friends that work that cancer floor together with the hospital administrators and the sewers? And he said, oh my gosh, that would be awesome. Do you see how that works? Michael was just there listening deeply to the community. And here was this opportunity. And he just got people together. And now they have this Capes for Kids ministry. And the nursing students dress up in superhero costumes and give capes to the kids on the floor. And the sewers that meet in the coffee shop sew the capes. And they actually sent a team of young adults to Greece when the boats were coming from Turkey, giving capes to the kids coming off the boats. And every cape says, you know, Capes for Kids, a ministry of Union Coffee Shop on them. This young man who talked to Michael wanted to have nothing to do with church. Now he's on Michael's lead team. Because Michael met him where he was in his own pain and in his own passion. And when I talked to Michael about this, I said, you know, you actually listened for God's preferred future. And you helped make manifest the realm of God. Oh my gosh, to be able to do that in life, isn't that a beautiful thing? So imagine bringing the witness of Christ's love in a worldwide network, collaborating and co-creating with nonprofits in our communities as well as people of other faith traditions, embracing the gifts of non-churchgoers and treating them not as other, but as beloved children of God. Getting rid of the barriers of the church in order to become more open source and grace-filled for that further creativity of spiritual practice. Letting go of the outcomes as we listen deeply to the people we meet where we live and work. Now, Paul and I see many expressions of this happening in the 21st century. In the last part of the book, we offer 19 glimpses of these new unfoldings. So what I want to do is I just want to quickly go over these. And again, I hope that you buy the book. So these we just call Simply Weird. And again, these are just glimpses. It's not. This book is not meant to be a model like, oh yeah, we're going to do the one of these. They're meant to stimulate conversation and creativity on your part. Because the one thing we know in the 21st century, ministry is highly contextual, right? So let's just start with the neighborhood church. The neighborhood church is people in a neighborhood actually doing that what I would say is the building block for any kind of community. It's doing deep listening and community organizing in the neighborhood and getting to know the assets in the neighborhood. So kind of that's the building block really of anything in this 21st century. And then from that, you can build simple cells like house churches, whether they meet in a home or the back room of a club. Simple cells are more than study groups. They're a church in that critical sense. Actually, I think as we move more deeply into this yellow value system expression, we're going to see more of these kind of non-hierarchical, organic kinds of unfoldings like house church or simple cell. There's, let's just, the pilgrimage. How many of you have ever gone on pilgrimage? Yeah. Is that a life-changing experience? Mm-hmm. When we're thinking about Jesus' invitation for us to spread the good news of love and peace to the ends of the earth, we're talking about transformation. And it's not about getting butts and seats. It's not about getting people in a worship building. It's about helping people to wake up to the knowledge that they are loved, they are lovable, and they are loving. Right? A pilgrimage is a transformational experience. You might do it once a year, you might do it once every 10 years, but we call that church because transformation is happening. Same time next year, how many of you have ever gone to church camp? Have you built relationships that have lasted, and then maybe the next year you go to the same camp and you see the same people and you might just see them once a year? But when you are in that camp setting, there's an experience of church, right? Let's claim that. The Innovation Lab. There are some new churches that basically what they do is they break through new forms of ministry with particular populations. And their big question is, what are we learning about how to be more effective in our mission? And those innovations, they might last for a couple years and then be gone. But it helps all of us as we move more deeply into the 21st century. Let's see, let me move on. And then we get more complex. So let me talk about the community center. So the community center is, it's not a church that rents unused space to pay its bills. That's not what a community center is. This is a church that maintains space in order to collaborate with numerous ministries and nonprofits and people in the community. So one example we give in the book is Valley and Mountain in Seattle. And so just to give you an idea, 6 years ago, John Helmier, who's the pastor, he got off a bus with a backpack and he spent his first week as a houseless person in his community, getting to know what is it like to live on the streets in the community that he was going to be planting a church. And then the first 6 months, all he did was listen to people. He just got one-to-one conversations with people and just listened. What are the problems here? What are the needs? And then when he was ready to gather some people, he realized that the kind of folks he was gathering, they're millennials, they're working maybe 3 or 4 jobs, they don't have a lot of money, and that he would have to do this model in a very simple way. And he also knew that he wanted to collaborate with as many people as possible in that community. So he, along with a nonprofits arts group, rented out space, and he got another nonprofit group that taught kids how to do renovation work. They were homeless kids. And they renovated the space, and now it's a co-working space. So they have over 25 groups that use that space as co-working. Many of them are nonprofits. They have Catholic charities coming in, and they have a warming center every day. They have a community garden. They have a kitchen where people can do entrepreneurial cooking, because it's a kitchen. What is that kind of kitchen called? Thank you, commercial kitchen. And they have folks in there teaching how to cook healthy meals. And John sees himself as the convener of that space, and almost as the chaplain of that community. You see the difference? And there's a lot of interactions between all of those groups that use that space. Okay, the cathedral. There's a church in California, actually in Hollywood, Beverly Hills. And they have this beautiful cathedral-like space, and very, very high church. So they have this sense of, when you walk into the space, it's like you're walking into a cathedral in like Europe. And you know how those cathedrals, they're kept open and anybody can come in and sit and pray or look and wander. So they have this beautiful space, but they've also started another kind of worship experience with couches and cocktail tables, with screens and video and conversation. So they have this kind of cathedral sense to them, but they also are offering something different. And what they're finding is that young people that are coming to that other service are finding the cathedral worship very empowering. So now they have people just choosing, okay, well, I want to go to this cathedral this week because it fits in my schedule, and next week I might go to that different kind of worship service. It's a really beautiful thing. The spiritual theme park is, like those big mega churches that I think are going to be around for a long time, and actually we still need them, but those are the churches where, you have kids, they have kids programming up the wazoo, and they have every kind of small group that you want for any kind of thing. Okay. And we have two very special categories. One we call the moment of grace, and that's all those beautiful new church starts that captured people's imagination, that did really beautiful ministry, but they weren't able to make it. And a lot of times when that happens, what happens to the pastor of those is they get shunned in the community. They something like they're failures. And we don't look upon that as failing. We look upon that as taking a tremendous risk of faith for the unfolding of the realm of God. The other one is holacracy, and this is what we see happening in maybe some healthcare industries right now, particularly in Europe, where there is no hierarchy per se. It's like a distributed leadership. One of the churches that did this really well was in New York City. He was a Korean pastor, and he said he spent his first 2 years preparing a whole worship service, and the only people that showed up were his family. But he was really persistent, and he said, I gotta figure this out, And luckily, he was open enough to then just start hanging out with young adults. And what he realized is when he just kind of hung out and kind of just hung out, they would call him in as a mentor when they needed him. And he began to listen deeply to where their passions were and what their needs were, and began to help them develop these pockets and groups. And the only kind of connection needed with this new church start was that there needed to be a Christian in the group. And that was it. And he kind of moved around in these groups and listened. And when somebody had an issue or a problem, he was there to listen. And then he trained up other people who could do that listening. And his church exploded to 50 groups in that next year. So that's what we're talking about, the holacracy, kind of trusting in that movement of the Spirit and listening deeply for that pop-up and being there at that particular time. Okay, so one other thing I want to say is there's a podcast called Reports from the Spiritual Frontier. If you're into podcasts, I highly recommend listening to this one. He interviews people, I call it the book of Acts for the 21st century. So he interviews people trying new things and new expressions and listening to their stories of triumph as well as their stories of failure. Okay. Where are we on time? Is there...
10:15.
And when do we need to break?
Whatever you like.
Well, you tell me, because I can...
Between 10:30 and 1:45, so 15, 20.
Okay, great. Any questions or comments on what I've said so far? Mm-hmm.
The question I have throughout all of this, I hope you can hear me, is where does the gospel of Jesus Christ fit in? And I'm not saying that in a judgmental way. I'm curious. You've talked about the reign of God in a couple of times, but my question about this weird church is it church if it's not about Jesus? It may be a really valuable spiritual experience that really grows people, and I celebrate that, but is it church?
So what is your definition of church?
Church is the community that follows Jesus, that rallies around the person of Jesus Christ, however you understand him. I would argue the incarnate, divine Jesus Christ, as well as Jesus, the prophet teacher. But that's my theology.
but a community that has grown and gathered around Jesus and his way. Where does that fit with all this? For example, so a meditation group is wonderful, but if Jesus never gets mentioned, I wouldn't call it church. And again, that's not a negative judgment, it's a definition.
Right, and okay, so that's a really good question, and I would say with each one of these value systems, the connection to the gospel is different, and it's a different kind of expression. So whereas in a blue value system, when we read the gospel stories, it's a pretty concrete reading. When you get into the orange value system, it might be more of a mythological kind of reading. When you get into the yellow value system, it's more of an embodiment. So what is the movement of the Jesus story? Well, there is death and resurrection. Well, there's this sense of compassion and love and moving into freedom from fear. How do we embody that? How do we practice beloved community? So it moves from having to gather around and confess a particular belief, which we would call orthodoxy, into orthopraxis. And so that's where you get this movement more into that inner spirituality, because I can practice yoga with folks in my yoga class who might have totally different theologies, but we're practicing, something together. And I know that might sound pretty namby-pamby to some people.
I hate to say it.
Yeah.
But how is that Christian? Specifically not spiritual, but Christian.
Yeah.
That's my question.
Okay, so let me give you an example of John Helmier at Valley and Mountain. He has a deep Christology, okay? They celebrate communion every Sunday. He preaches out of the gospel. But the first 2 years that they gathered, because he knew in a green value system of which he finds himself, that there's a lot of landmines around belief. So he said, I'm not going there. We're going to focus on creating a beloved community, as Jesus taught us in the Gospels. But I'm not going to talk about what you have to believe in order to be a member of this community.
It's that word believe I'm getting hung up on. It's not about belief for me. It's about relationship.
So
if there's no relationship with Jesus.
I think that Jesus calls us to be the relationship. So I consider myself pastor for a group of 50 young adults who don't have a spiritual home, and some days we call it choir, and some days we call it therapy, and some days they find out about Jesus through the way we behave together as a community. And then it's up to the individual to seek out their relationship with Jesus through the relationships that we're building on the street.
I want you to keep that question, because I think we all have to wrestle with that. And I hope that you get a sense that I'm presenting some things and there's no answers to this stuff. We're in a messy time. And so it's really good to wrestle with that. It's really good that you bring that question up for all of us to say, yeah, how do we maintain how do we honor our tradition? How do we, almost like a sensei, we are keepers of the tradition. How do we keep the tradition and meet people what they are and invite them in to the tradition in a way that they can hear? And there's always that tension there. So hang with that tension. Yeah.
This is a crucial question that a sister asked, and it's a very powerful one.
Yeah.
That I've been struggling with in my campus ministry at
Yeah.
UVic for quite a number of years now. Because I get, twice a week I get 40 students doing yoga. I've got people doing meditation. When I'm teaching meditation, I make a reference to my own Christian rootedness.
Yes.
But I don't make any assumption that anybody there needs to have that kind of Christian rootedness.
Mm-hmm.
And the question about how does this relate to Jesus, let me tell you. It just occurs to me right now. It relates to Jesus through me. It's my relationship with those young people that are sitting there in the circle, are our young people, our community people, our children. They're there. I'm speaking with gray hair now. Those are in our communities, and Christ, Jesus calls me to be in relationship with Jesus, me personally, and they then relate to Jesus through me, and they don't need to use the language for Jesus. I don't need it, but they know where my rootedness is. They know where I'm connected, and so, but they don't have to believe what I believe, but they will relate to Jesus in and through my presence to them. And that is key. And that's a very different way of thinking out of the blue and previous models. But it is yellow thinking.
Yes, it is.
And it's a different way of being church.
Yeah.
And so let me just give you one more thing. So one wonderful thing that's happened through our church's connection with campus ministry is that we provide soup suppers. Every second Thursday, we have a soup supper, and quite a number of you here are involved in providing pasta soup supper. I have asked a number of times. It's beautiful in making the soup suppers. It's great. Big, huge pots come. Students participate. I always mention to the students which church kind of delivered that food, and how there was a whole bunch of usually elders that were in their kitchens, 5 or 6 people who were creating the soup so that we could all eat it together. And often the question is, where are they? And so, how are we embodying Jesus in our discipleship and our ministry? Come with the soup and stay and relate to the young people. You don't have to make them Christians. No. You just have to be a Christian in relationship to them. And that is a different way of being church than our expectation of wanting them to come to our Sunday morning celebration.
Thank you, Henry. I'm reminded of the story in Jesus sending out the 72. And when he sends out the 72, he says to them, don't take your baggage with you. Don't take your assumptions with you. Don't take your Sunday school curriculum with you. And he said what you need to do is you need to pray. You need to pray to be in alignment with the movement of the Holy Spirit. And he sent them out into a territory where Jews were, it was a scary territory for Jews to be in, let's just put it that way. And he said, I want you to get to know people. I want you to look for people of peace. And when you find them, I want you to get to know them. I want you to break bread with them. I want you to eat what they eat. Jews, I want you to eat what they eat. And in the process of getting to know people, what happens? We share story. We share pain. We share hopes and dreams. And in that deep connection, healing happens. And Jesus says, if you find anybody that needs to be healed, heal them. And then he says, and before you go, say, guess what? We experienced the realm of God together. And then be on your way. It's highly incarnational, isn't it? What time do we have?
10:23.
Okay, well,